Welcome to this video on relative formula mass, where you're going to be looking at how you can work out the formula mass for different compounds. Now the first thing you need to know is the definition for relative formula mass, which is the sum of all the relative atomic masses for a substance. So the first thing you need to be able to do is work out the number of each element in a substance. So the example here that I'm going to use is copper carbonate. Now the first thing to note is if you've got a capital letter and a small letter next to each other, that's one element. So I've got one copper because there's no little number down here. Two capital letters next to each other means I've got two different elements. So I've got one carbon atom, and then this little 3 down here only applies to the one thing before it. So I've got 3 oxygens. If I were to look at a slightly more complicated one, iron, again there's no number after it. So I've got 1, but in case of oxygen and hydrogen, I've got a bracket around it. Now this 2 here applies to everything inside the bracket. So I've got 2 times my 1 oxygen, which gives me 2 oxygens, and 2 times my 1 hydrogen, which gives me 2 hydrogens. And if we look at the third example, aluminium again, there's only one of it. Capital A, small l, 1 element. Capital C, capital O, 3. So the first thing I'd do here is look inside the bracket and see what I've got, and then you multiply it by that number outside of the brackets. So in this case I've got carbon, and I've got 1 of them, but I've multiplied it by 2, so I've got 2 carbons. Oxygen, I've got 3 inside the bracket, 2 outside the bracket, so what you do is you multiply, so 3 times 2 gives me 6 oxygens. For step 2 then, the next part you need to do is find out the relative atomic mass for each element, and it's normally given in the question. So we've got copper, it tells us we've got an atomic mass of 63.5, carbon tells us there's a mass of 12, and oxygen tells us a mass of 16. For step 3 then, what you need to do is multiply the atomic mass by the number of element that occurs. So I know I've got a number of 1 for copper, and I've got a mass of 63.5. So what I need to do is multiply 1 by 63.5, which gives me that. I've got 1 times 12, which is 12, and then I've got 3 times 16, which gives me 48. I do the same with the other examples. I had iron, which I had 1 of. 1 times 56 is 56. 2 oxygens, so 2 times 16 is 32. And 2 hydrogens, so 2 times 1 is 2. And then the same with the final one. 1 aluminium, so 1 times 27 is 27. 1 times 2 is 2 carbons, times 12 is 24. And then 3 times 2 is 6 oxygens, times that by 16, which gives me 96. And then the final step is to add all of these together. So 63.5 plus 12 plus 48 gives me 123.5. 56 plus 32 plus 2 gives me 90. And 27 plus 24 plus 96 gives me 147. Let's have a look at water as an example then. So I've got H2, which tells me I've got 2 hydrogens, and I've got O. There's nothing after it, so that tells me I've got 1 oxygen. The next step is to have a look at the atomic number. So H2O I've got 2 times 1, and oxygen I've got 1 times by 16. So finally we add those together. 16 plus 2 gives me 18 for my answer. On to example 2 then, CH4. So I've got 1 carbon, and I've got 4 hydrogens. So I take the atomic mass, which for hydrogen is 1, 4 times 1. And for carbon is 12, so 1 times 12. And then add those together, 4 plus 12 gives me 16. Alright, let's try a harder example then. So in this case we're going to do CaOH2. Now the only thing you need to remember with this one is what's inside the brackets. So I've got 1 calcium, so 1 times 40 is 40. I've got 1 oxygen in the brackets but 2 outside, so I've got 2 oxygens. And I've got 1 hydrogen inside the brackets but 2 on the outside. So I have 2 hydrogens. This means for oxygen I have 2 times 16, which is 32, and for hydrogen I have 2 times 1, which is 2. Now all I'm left to do is add these together, which gives me 40 plus 32 plus 2, which gives me 74. Let's try one final example then, NH420, which is as hard as you will get in the exam. So, start off with the easy bit. I've got one oxygen, so 1 times 16. Then inside the brackets I've got 2 of the hydrogens. I had 4, so 2 times 4 is 8. So 8 times 1 gives me 8 overall. And then nitrogen, I've got 1 inside the bracket, multiply that by 2, so it's 2 times 14, which gives me 28. Now all I need to do is add those together, so 16 plus 8 plus 28, which gives me a total of 52. Right, onto the questions then. So I've given you the atomic masses for each of the elements that you need at the top. Work out the relative formula mass for the following compounds. You'll notice there are 2 marks available for the tougher questions, which will generally only come up in the higher paper. Pause the video, have a go, and we'll see how you've done in a min. Okay, if we start off with the first one then, so NH3. I've got 1 nitrogen, which has got an atomic mass of 14. I have got 3 hydrogens, so 3 times 1. Add that together. 3 plus 14 is 17. Question 2. I've got 1 calcium and 2 chlorines, so 1 times 40 plus 2 times 35.5, which gives me 111. Question 3. I've got 3 carbons, so 3 times 12. I've got 6 hydrogens, so 6 times 1. Add those together, gives me 42. Question 4. I've got 1 aluminium. 1 times 27 is 27. I've got 2 oxygens. 2 times 16 is 32. And I've got 2 hydrogens. 2 times 1 is 2. Add that together, I get 61. And then finally, the big tough one at the end, NH4,3P. So we'll start off with the nitrogen, 3 nitrogens, because I've got the 3 outside the brackets, times by 14 is 42. I've got 4 hydrogens times by 3, which is 12. And then phosphorus, I've got 1 of those, so 1 times 31 gives me 31. Add all those together and I get 85, which is 2 marks for that. And that about sums up this video. So we'll move on to the review question, and that will do. Which is, Dave thinks the relative formula mass of magnesium hydroxide is 42 and Mike thinks it's 58. Using the atomic masses below, determine who is correct. You must show your working to get both marks. And there we go, that ends this video. Hi guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, click the subscribe button down below and visit the website mrbarnestc.com for more.